Do you want to start your own business? Here are 10 questions you should ask yourself before you take that leap. Let's get into it. Hey, this is Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. So I help people navigate their startup journeys, whether they're starting a for-profit or a nonprofit business. And in this video, I want to share 10 questions you should ask yourself if you're thinking about starting your own business. And the thing is, for a lot of you who may be watching this video and you're starting businesses with probably little money and you haven't really seen the model of what a business owner looks like, or you don't really know a lot of people who own their own businesses, you don't know what to look for. You don't know what to expect. So I'm going to give you these 10 questions that you can go through to see if you are really ready for this. Here's the first question. Why do I want to do this? Everybody's always talking about what's your why, what's your why. But I do think it's important because the thing that motivates you is going to be the thing to propel you forward when times get tough. And if the reason why you're doing this is very surface level or honestly kind of vain and you're only doing it for the looks and things like that, when it gets tough, because it will, then that's not going to hold you. That's not going to sustain you. But if you have a deeper reason, if you're connected to the root of why you want to do this, then that's the thing that you can pull from when you need support, when you need encouragement. But also knowing why you want to do this, why you want to have your own business, helps you understand what your life is going to look like. Because some people want to start their own business because they just want to have something on the side, or they just want to feel like they own something, right? Some people want to start their own business because they want to be a boss and they want to manage a big company and they want to make millions of dollars and be flashy and do all the things. Some people want to start their own business because they just want freedom and they're tired of being told what to do on the job and they want the freedom to move the way they want to move, or maybe they want to spend the time with their families and be able to dictate their schedules on their own instead of having somebody else dictate their schedule. Whatever that is for you, and it may be a combination of all of that, you have to decide for yourself, why do you even want to start a business? And it's really for yourself. This question I'm saying is for you. Ask yourself, what am I getting out of this? What is the purpose for me wanting to do this? Because you're going to come back to that question over and over again, but it's going to sound a little different. It's going to be like, why did I do this? Why am I even doing this? And honestly, there are going to be times where you're going to come to a crossroads and you're like, should I continue? So always being in tune with your why, and that why may change, it may evolve, but always being in tune with it can help center and ground you so you can make better decisions when it comes to your business. Number 2, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? So whether you have a for-profit or a nonprofit business, you are creating a product or a service because you want to solve something for somebody. Every product, even a product like a stapler or a paper clip, is made to solve a problem. And knowing what the problem is the key component to your marketing, because you need to understand why somebody would want to purchase your service, or why they would want to purchase your product, or why somebody would want to use your service if you're a nonprofit. But you need to understand, like, what is the major problem so that your product can be optimized to their needs. And when you market to them, you can directly speak to the thing in them that they need addressed or they need solved. And you can talk about how your product or your service addresses that thing that's nagging them, right? For something as simple as a stapler, well, if you want to present your business products or your documents in a professional way, they need to be collated and they need to be gathered together. So having a stapler makes that happen. It sounds so simplistic, but if you really think about it, every product, no matter how simple it is, was created to solve a problem. And sometimes what people will do is say, I really want to do this. I have this skill set and I want to do this. Like maybe people want to do coaching or people want to teach piano lessons, right? And you start there. You have a skill set that you want to make money with. But you start there, but you don't think about why anybody would or should use that service or use the product that you're trying to create. So again, the key part of marketing is speaking to the problem in a person and letting them know that your product or your service can solve that. So if you're providing piano lessons, maybe there's a customer that's always wanted to learn how to play the piano. They've always wanted to learn how to play by ear, right? Whatever problem you want to speak to helps you design the kind of product and service you have. Because there are a lot of people who can provide piano lessons, but maybe for your piano lessons, you're providing a very specific kind of lesson. You are mainly teaching people how to play by ear, or maybe you are mainly teaching people how to play gospel, right? You need to understand like what's the key problem you're trying to solve for your customer, and that will help you design the best product and help you sell your product easily. Number 3 is, who is your target customer? It's very much related to what I just talked about. So everybody has a target customer, and in every marketing class that you take, you'll hear people say that everybody is not your customer. And when you do any kind of marketing coaching or business coaching, they're going to ask, who is your target customer? What is your ideal customer profile? And it's just not wise to say everybody or anybody could be my customer. You want to identify what's called a customer avatar. You want to understand who is your ideal customer. You want to know what's their name, where do they live, what's their family structure, do they have children, are they single, are they married, are they widowed, are they divorced, where do they shop, right? What are their hobbies, where do they frequent, where do they work? The more you understand your ideal customer, the better you can understand what the problem is for them that you're trying to resolve with your product or your service. So one of the early things you need to do when you're designing your business and trying to figure out what your marketing plan is and designing your business plan, what you really need to do is figure out who your target customer is. And you can create your ideal customer profile. It could be more than one, because maybe there are different types of people that you want to target and that you want to sell to. But you need to figure out what are the things that would attract them to you. So maybe using the example of the piano lessons, maybe you want to specifically target people who are already ministers of music in church, and you want to target those people who are trying to grow or expand their ear, right? So you want them to get better. You want them to play better chords or fatter chords or whatever. That's a very specific type of service. And when you're marketing, it's very clear who you need to reach, right? So when you need to do ads, or when you're trying to figure out where those customers are, because you have a really good understanding of who that customer is, it's easier to find them. The easy answer to that is they're in church every Sunday morning because they're playing. So maybe some of your marketing is reaching out to current churches or doing a workshop with churches in the area. And that's one way you can build your customer base, right? If you're a nonprofit, this still applies when you think about your donors. So you need certain people to donate to your organization. So you need to figure out who your ideal donors are. You can create donor profiles the exact same way. You can identify those donors, what their ages are. You can identify the kind of causes they like to support. How much have they given in the past? What are their life experiences that influence their giving? Where do they shop, right? What are their behaviors? Because you can target them through ads as well. So you can do the same thing on the nonprofit side, but regardless, you need to figure out who your ideal customer or donor is, and that will help you fine tune your marketing. Number 4, what is your business structure? So when I started my business 10 years ago, I thought LLC was the only business structure. I was very confused because you don't hear a lot about anything else. I heard a lot about LLC, and I knew a little bit about sole proprietorships and things like that. I knew enough to understand the difference between sole proprietorship and LLC, but I didn't know anything else beyond that. And I didn't understand what the implications were of me choosing an LLC versus me choosing to stay a sole proprietor or being a corporation. I had no idea that I could even start my own corporation. No clue, right? So you got to decide for yourself, what is the business structure that you want to start with and grow with? Because you may start with a certain business structure and then eventually you branch out and do something different. So for example, if you are a crafter and you sell items at local fairs and things like that, you may not feel the need to expand so much into an LLC, and you still want to be a sole proprietor. You can absolutely do that. If you start making more money, you may want to expand and become an LLC. Maybe you want to apply for business credit. And so in order to do that, you establish a business structure. If you are a nonprofit, in most cases, you have to incorporate. You are actually a corporation. So you need to understand the implications of having your own corporation, because that means you need a board. That means you have to meet. There's documentation you have to have. And it's not just nonprofits either. If you have a for-profit corporation, you have to have meetings and documents, and you have to identify who your shareholders are and things like that. So it's really important for you to know the different business structures that you have access to, and what it means for you when you're in the startup phase, and what it means for you later in your business journey. And I love to give this caveat: I am not a lawyer, and I am not an accountant, and I'm not your lawyer or your accountant. So this is just general information based on my history in the 10 years that I have been in business and worked in this arena. But if you have specific questions and you need to understand what it means for you to pick a certain business structure, go ahead and engage the services of an attorney or an accountant. It will be very useful. And I know in the beginning it feels like, why should I waste my time on a consultation? But it really does matter, because it impacts so many different things, including taxes, which is my next one. So the next one is, what are the tax implications of my business? And this depends on what business structure you pick. If you are a sole proprietor or you are an LLC, then you report your taxes a certain way. If you've started a corporation, then that's a separate filing that you have to do, which is separate from your personal taxes that you submit. And there are separate kinds of deadlines for corporations versus personal taxes. It's different. You need to understand that. You'll hear some people say, well, you can be an LLC and you can elect to be taxed as an S Corp. You need to understand what that means. If you elect to be taxed as an S Corp, that means you have to take payroll, right? It doesn't mean you have to do payroll every month. You can do it in different sequences, but you still have to make enough money in order to give yourself a reasonable salary. You need to know that, because if you're taking a salary, then taxes are taken out and you are counted as an employee, right? You need to have some kind of payroll if you're going to pay yourself as an S Corp. If you have an LLC, you may have to pay tax quarterly based on the earnings that you have, to avoid having a hefty fine and penalties when you file your taxes at the end of the year. There are so many different considerations, and the first thing you got to know for yourself is, what is my business structure? And then how is that going to impact my taxes? And these two kind of go together, because based on how your taxes flow, that may impact what business structure that you pick. So that's why it's so important to talk to accountants, to talk to attorneys who can advise you the best way to go and help you understand what's best for the situation that you are in and the kind of business you want to have. The next one is, where are you going to get your starting capital? And I can say this in a more simpler way. Where are you going to get your money from when you're starting out? Where is it going to come from? Because here's the thing. In the pandemic, there was so much buzz about business grants and money out there for businesses. And some of that was true. There was money flowing for businesses. Some of that has dried up. But what has carried over from that time period is people thinking that there's just all these business startup grants that you can have for your business. And granted, there are some programs out there for startup entrepreneurs. There are grants you can pursue, but relatively speaking, it's not a whole lot. I get this question a lot in the nonprofit space, like, where are all the startup grants? I did do another video on that, and I'm going to link that above if you're interested to know where the startup grants are. But even in that space, where there's an expectation that you're going to go after grants, there aren't a lot of startup grants necessarily in that space either, or they're not necessarily marketed as startup grants. So there's this misconception that if you start a business, you don't really have to put out any money. Or you'll see some videos where people are like, start your business with business credit. You don't have to do anything. Everything is free. You can just get a credit card, just put everything on a credit card in the beginning. That's not necessarily true. The reality is, no matter what kind of business you have to put out some money in the beginning. You have to invest, and you should. This is what I've learned, and it's been a really hard lesson I had to learn. If you start out your business with a scarcity mindset, if you start your business thinking of all the ways you are not going to spend money, then you're going to have a hard time growing and prospering, because the reality is once you spend, once you invest, once you release that hold on money, it comes back to you. And if you hold so tight to the idea that you don't want to spend money because you're getting into this to make money, or if you're so scared of losing money, because that's going to happen too, then you're not going to take the risk you need to take to be successful. And it's going to be hard to be sustainable and to be around for years and years to come. So you need to ask yourself, how much money do I have to start out with? And it needs to be something. First of all, if you want to set up a business structure, if you want to have an LLC or a corporation, you have to pay money for that. And that's nonprofits included. If you're a nonprofit, you have to pay to get 501c3 status. There's a fee for that to be tax exempt. You have to pay startup costs for your website and for advertising and marketing. You have to pay startup costs for design, for getting logos and things like that. If you want to trademark your business, there are startup costs for that. So you really do need to budget for yourself and figure out what it's going to take for your business to launch. And if you are a for-profit, then you just need to understand that it's going to take a while for money to start coming in. You're going to have to invest some time and some money before people start purchasing. And with nonprofits, it's sort of the same thing. Because you are providing a service that people typically don't pay for, you have to budget and figure out how you're going to fundraise and how you're going to cover your expenses for the year. It's the same kind of thing. You need to think about how much money is needed to get this thing going and running. And then even after that, what are you going to do to sustain? Here's the next question you need to ask yourself. Do I want to manage people, or do I want to be a solopreneur? This one is really, really key, because I think one of the biggest issues that people have with running businesses is managing people. And this is for-profit or nonprofit. It doesn't matter. It's really hard to get people to do things the way you want them to do them. It's really hard for people to feel as committed and connected to your organization or to your business the way you do. You care a lot about this because for a lot of you, it's your dream to do this. And you want people to care and be as passionate about it as you would. But the reality is, most people aren't. The majority of people, at least on the for-profit side, are going to work with you because they need to eat. They need money too. Yeah, it's nice to inspire them about the idea of your business, but most people on the for-profit side are motivated by the idea of making money. On the nonprofit side, I'm talking more so about your board first. Now, you do have to inspire those people to do the work to start up your organization. But once you get a committed group of volunteers, then you can start raising money to support employees who can come in and actually do the work of your organization. But let's just focus on for-profit, because this really matters for for-profits. Do you really want to spend your time managing people, or do you want to do all the work yourself? And there are pros and cons to each of those. If you're going to manage people, you're going to spend most of your time managing people. But the upside to that is the more people you have, the more productive your business can be, the more potential to make money. Now, it's not always the case, because you may be able to make lots of money doing a solopreneur kind of thing. But generally, if you're going to make more money, you add people, you add hands. And the more hands you have to do the work, then the more potential there is for money. But the more hands, the less control you have of how the work is done, which is why you have to spend a lot of time building relationships with your staff, working with your staff or your contractors, setting up standard operating procedures to make sure they are clear on what their role is, and then holding them accountable for the things you ask them to do. That takes a lot of time. It takes a whole lot of time, and it is stressful, because when you're managing people, if those people can't work, then you got to fill it in. And those people aren't necessarily obligated to show up to work. It's not their business, it's yours. You're always going to show up, but not necessarily them. So on the flip side, as a solopreneur, it may seem a little more appealing now, because you're like, I don't want to deal with people. I don't want to know if people won't call out. I just want to do it all myself. But the con to that is, well, if you're not functional, if you get sick, or if you're not present, and the work only happens if you're present, then you lose out on revenue that way. So you got to have some contingencies in place where either the work happens whether or not you're there or present, or you have some kind of passive way to make money where you only have to come in here and there to make sure whatever system you have in place still runs. This is the next question you need to ask yourself. How is this going to impact my life? And this is a really important question because you're going to work way harder on your business than you probably ever have worked on a job. And it's because it's something you're probably passionate about, or at least you're passionate about making money. So your motivation to work on your business, especially in the beginning, is pretty high because you want it to be successful and you're driven by the idea that you could really do this and you can really work for yourself. It's an exciting kind of feeling. It's really exhilarating, honestly. It's intoxicating at times to think of the fact that you could work and work and work and your dream come true. But the downside of that is something has to be sacrificed. You're going to have to work on your business. You're going to have to work on it a lot, especially in the beginning. And especially if you don't have a lot of money so that other people can do the work for you so that you can delegate some of your tasks. If in the beginning you're doing a lot of the work, you're not going to have time to have a social life. It's going to impact your relationships. It's going to impact your parenting. It's going to get in the way. So you have to decide at what level or what threshold do you want it to impact your life? And where is the boundary where you're like, this can't be crossed no matter what. I'm never going to sacrifice this. And I can't make that decision for you. You have to decide that for yourself. But you have to think long and hard about what this will mean for your life and what it will change and what you want it to change and what you don't want it to change. And let me just give you a piece of advice. Set very clear boundaries on your business. I know in the beginning you're going to get used to working till 2, 3 in the morning or working on your weekends or taking up your evenings and things like that. But at some point you got to transition into a regular life and take care of yourself, because there's no point in working yourself to death and not be able to enjoy what you've worked for. So at some point, draw a boundary so that you can get rest, so that you can spend time with your family. Because most of you, I would venture to say, want to start a business because you want to have time to do the things you really care about. And for a lot of you, that's your family. That's spending time with your family. But if you don't draw those boundaries and you're not intentional about that in the beginning, those lines can get really blurry and you're going to wake up and be like, dang, I haven't talked to this person, or dang, I haven't spent time with my kids like I'm supposed to. Dang, I haven't gone on a date with my significant other in a minute. So you really need to think about that. Here's the last thing I'll say too, that I didn't take into consideration was diet and movement. This is especially if you're doing like a home-based business or like a service-based business where you don't have to be present to do the work. And if you don't have to get up and go somewhere, like go to work, you just have to work from your house or occasionally meet people, it's going to definitely impact your diet and it's going to impact your health. So prioritize movement. And I had to learn this the hard way. And I'm still trying to recover from just being at home and being sedentary and not moving a lot. That impacted my body. That put more weight on my body. Also, if you're sitting around a computer a lot, you might snack. Or you might make unhealthy food choices because you don't have time to cook meals. So also think about that. Think about your diet and think about your physical health and what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're not willing to sacrifice for your business. Here's the next thing. What's your timeline? At some point, you have to do it. At some point, you have to decide for yourself when you're going to start your business. And especially for those who want to go full time and they want their business to support their life, you have to decide at what point you're going to flip the switch and work for yourself. And it can be a scary jump, but if you are going into it eyes wide open, it won't feel as bad. And I have found that it's important to set a date. It's important to say to yourself when it's time. So what I would do is when I would get frustrated about my job or frustrated about the work I was doing and saying to myself, this is not the work I want to do, I would force myself to look at my timeline and force myself to be real about what it would take to get there. And I would say, okay, well, you don't want to do this work anymore. Then when are you going to do these things to make sure you can get to this point? So I set a date for myself. I actually set a date for myself 5 years prior. I had no idea how I was going to make it. I had no plans, no real intentions. But as I got closer, like 2 years in, I said to myself, okay, it really is going to be this date. And I started putting things in place, and I started putting savings away. And this is another important point. I made sure that all the early startup costs that I had to pay, I paid those while I still had a job, while I still had a paycheck from somebody else. I paid those early expenses and made money and invested in the business while I was still working, so that when I actually went out on my own, I already had the business rolling. I had some money coming through, and it wasn't a hard transition for me. So my piece of advice for you is to figure out, what is your timeline? Maybe it's 10 years. That's okay. Maybe you want to wait till you're retired to work on it. Maybe you want to start and then transition like I did. Whatever it is, figure out what that date is and stick to it. And then finally, ask yourself, what's the exit strategy for my business? So we get so excited about the startup process that we forget about the end. And this is something that I've been thinking about lately, because my whole thing was, I just need to make enough money to support myself. That's all I'm worried about. As long as I can pay my bills and do what I like to do, I'm good. But that's not good enough. And I owe myself more than that to just get by. I want to thrive. I want to flourish. So I have to think about retirement age. Like, where do I want to be? Do I still want to be running a business? Do I still want to be the CEO? Maybe I want to be more passive. Do I still want to be doing this kind of work 10 years from now? And it's really important for you to think about your future 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, to figure out if the position you're in now or the position you're fighting to be in is the same position you want to be in way later. And if it's not, then making sure as you're growing in your business that you're also putting plans in place so that when it's time to transition off, there's an off ramp. This is important for nonprofits too, because nonprofit founders actually do not have ownership of their nonprofits, right? And so you're only really affiliated with the nonprofit if you're working for the nonprofit or you are on the board. You can be affiliated as a founder, but you don't really have any real ties to it unless you're currently working in some kind of capacity with the nonprofit. So if you're the executive director, you can't be the executive director forever. So you have to figure out when you want to transition off, who is the ideal person, and how is your board going to support you after you transition off. You really need to be thinking about that early on. So whatever your plan is, whatever you want to do, and it's really rooted in why you're doing this, then think about what's the off ramp. What's the final decision? Are you just going to perpetually work in this business, right? What happens when you're 70 or you're 80? God willing, do you still want to be doing the things you're doing right now? I know I don't. So I need to decide for myself, well, what are the things I'm going to put in place so I don't have to work at this level? And you have to ask those same questions of yourself. I hope this information was helpful. If you have any tips, if you are a business owner and you have tips for other people, this is a community here with Boss on a Budget, and we lift up each other and we support and encourage each other. So I would love if you dropped a comment to share something about your business journey to encourage someone else or to give advice. If you need help with your startup process, you can visit me at bossonabudget.com for resources. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.